Welcome to the Long Range Pursuit Podcast, presented by Gunwerks, where we learn about and share long-range shooting techniques, science, and gear.
We've got an episode of Long Range Pursuit with one of my good friends, Tom Beckstrand. He is one of my favorite gun writers, works for Guns and Ammo and other publications. Maybe you could give us just a little background of where we can find media and content that you are producing for the industry right now.
Right. So easiest would be the monthly subscription to Guns and Ammo. That way it comes right to the house. And then, we've got a special interest publications division. I do some work there, mostly in precision rifle, do a little bit with Peterson's hunting, and then I do Guns and Ammo TV. I always kind of chuckle at the term. I'm considered on-camera talent. I like to remind my wife of that. But that's on the Sportsman's Channel.
In what setting are you reminding your wife of that?
Usually when I've done something stupid, and then it's on My Outdoor TV. It's an app that,
Okay.
so those are all the places.
What is your content specialty? Maybe we can share that real quick.
The rifle and optics editor for Guns and Ammo. So it's rifles, optics, ammunition, rifle ammunition predominantly. Do a little bit of handguns, but then only if it's something connected to the military because of, prior military service.
Yeah. This is, I think this is why we're buddies, is because you and I both get to do really cool stuff. We're working on cool stuff.
Yeah. It keeps the little boy alive.
Well, we met probably, it feels like it's been 20 years ago, but it was probably about 10, 12 years ago at a Night Force event.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Met at a Night Force event and then crossed paths again, various media events, SHOT Show, you just make friends and start hanging out and having a good time.
It's actually not very common for me to make friends. So, yeah, I don't do the friend thing very well. I mean, we go 5 years without talking to each other. That's kind of my friend vibe right there.
Yeah. Well, that's how you know a good friend, right? You just pick up where you left off. I mean, I can think of times where it's been a while and I'll just send a text. I've got some kind of stupid question I want to ask you about something. And then off we go to the races, man.
Yeah. Well, I think the purpose that this call was set up for was to talk about our Africa trip that we had. But yeah, that was pretty good. I'm still feeling pretty good about that. But I think,
me too.
I think we can pretty much go anywhere we want. I've always been fascinated with, your story about how you got into gun writing. And I kind of feel like before we just take a deep dive into this Africa one and the stories that came out of that trip, I think a lot of the people that, are participating in today's media, are getting bombarded on social, and maybe that we're seeing the gun writer, the traditional, here's a product and here's why you need to look at it, or, here's what this product does. It feels like it's taking back seat to these short little 10-second sizzle reels.
Right. Yeah, that's, yeah. There's a reason I don't participate too much in social media. Do a little bit of video work, but one of the big hiccups or difficulties that gun media faces today is that it is geared towards a sizzle reel, and then the people presenting the content kind of have limited experience with it. Obviously these are my opinions, and so the default mode is, here's the video of me shooting a gun, here's me talking about the specs without really explaining why they matter, and we're out. And to me, that's kind of frustrating. I mean, if I'm going to invest some time into looking at what you've created, I mean, hey, props to you for doing it. And I think there's a lot of people that just want to be entertained. So, you want to make people chuckle and everything else. But if I'm giving you my time, I expect to walk away with something.
Yeah.
I learned something that I didn't know before, or the story behind a product, because that's one thing that always kind of bothers me a little bit. People are like, oh, it's all gun media. You're just writing advertisements. And it's like, well, no, there's research that you have to do. Like there's a story behind how this product came to be. And even if you do nothing but explain, here's why this exists in this time period, then you've done someone a service. But yeah, there's a lot of time wasting going on for sure.
I think if I had to characterize, and I like the term gun media, I think that's pretty good, but I'm thinking more traditionally on the print side. I will go back and I will tell you with 100% confidence that a handful of gun writers that I got into when I was in college is what created this company.
Right.
But at the same time, when I started this company, I had a hard time seeing the value, with a lot of the media channel, because like there was this transition that happened, and I don't know exactly when it happened, but at one point, all the gun writers were the kind of like, they were journalists.
Yes.
As their job was to protect the public from the marketing bullcrap that gun companies put out, right? I mean, that was essentially what they would do.
And that's still the job.
I know, but I don't know that it gets executed in that same, just like some of our journalism has fallen off in the mainstream media. I don't know that ethical standard of what's there exists as strongly with everybody. I mean, I don't know that every writer out there really is a journalist anymore. I think some of them, like you said, might be entertainers. And
well, and the litmus test is, in order to really do a product right, and really you got to watch out for your reader. That's the guy you represent. But you have to live the life. That's what a lot of people don't understand. Like, if you're going to write about rifles and optics, you can't sit at your house, read a press release, and bang out an article. A minimum standards, take it to the range and evaluate it for accuracy. But really what you need to be doing is shooting competitively and going out and hunting, and like optics in particular. That's one of the things that, people are like, oh, this scope, you don't really need that. Well, if you're shooting in bright sunlight, yeah, you don't need a lot of scope. But when optical conditions get difficult, like overcast or rainy, or you're trying to find an animal in shadow, well, you get what you pay for.
Yeah.
And understanding that and be able to convey that to the reader of, hey, this is why this particular scope is $2,000 or $4,000 and this one is a few hundred.
Yeah.
Like, what's the difference?
I think that when I still take magazines and I still browse articles, and a lot of it is, hey, what's everybody doing?
Right.
And I think a lot of people look now to the media to tell them, what's new. And I think that's a great and valuable function. One thing that I've noticed, and with you and a few other people that I really have a lot of respect for, and I really like to dive in and not just look at the pictures, but read.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
One of the things that I pick up on is you guys have this code of, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. So an astute reader that's reading between the lines can tell, hey, look, you guys aren't going to bash anybody, right?
Right.
That's not your job.
Yeah, it's ugly.
But when something doesn't perform, you don't write bullshit.
No, like the golden rule is you can't lie.
Yeah.
And so, if I don't like it, then I won't write about it. That's the biggest, that step one is, hey, this isn't going to be good for anybody, so I'm just going to walk away now.
Yeah.
And so, like, that's one way that you kind of protect yourself and protect the reader. And then the other thing is, probably one of the hardest articles I had to write was about, it's a $150 scope, Chinese production. And I was like, whew, when I got the assignment, the guys that I work with, they were all giggling. They're like, yeah, let's see you do this, And, but what I wrote about is, hey, here is the intended application. Like, if money is a finite resource, and you want to go shoot rimfire at a range, and or it's going to be your kid's gun, and you're kind of assessing of, okay, how much money do I want to throw at this? Then it is a reasonable optic for that. Not everything is, the apocalypse has started, my life is on the line, you should totally use this $150 optic. No, you shouldn't.
You know, that was probably a 5-year ago story, I'm guessing. Because the $100 to $500 Chinese scope right now is hot. Like, I'll tell you, those guys decided that they are going to take that industry, and the high end Japanese stuff. They see it. To me, oh, go ahead. Sorry, I was just saying I've looked at and worked with and have touched and felt, you know, some Chinese brands that are punching way above what anybody's expectations are.
Right. Now, my heart is always for, like, I love America, and I love American stuff. Money is a finite resource. So, and you've got to take Chinese products seriously. And one of the things that I've noticed 5-6 years ago, you know, I'd do a tracking test on $150, $1,000 Chinese optic. And what you'll find is a lot of times guys will do tracking tests, and they'll move it, you know, they'll go to the 100-yard range and they'll move it, 8 minutes.
Yeah.
No, like it's a percentage error. You got to dial like 45, 50 minutes. I try to get, the way I've got mine set up, I shoot at 50 yards, it's 16 mils. So I got to see, you got to have a big distance. And then I've got a rifle built just for evaluating optics and tracking. And what I found is that 5-6 years ago, you couldn't get a Chinese optic accurate. It wouldn't dial accurately enough that you could ever true your rifle to that scope. So your ballistic calculators, hey, I want to spin the turret ring steel at 600, 700, 800. Like, you're never going to know, is it my scope? Is my ballistic calculator off? There's just not enough accuracy in that combination. But that's changed in the last, I think I was 2 years ago, I got a Chinese scope and I was like, all right, let's see where they're at. And doggone, that thing dialed right on the money, and it was not expensive. So they are figuring it out. They're manufacturing.
You know where that's coming from? Where that's coming from is, so there's one big Japanese supplier that is supplying European brands, American brands. Like, they supply all of the high-end scopes in the whole industry, unless you're a maker like a Swarovski or a Leopold. Like, they're supplying. And about, I would guess this is probably about 25-ish years ago, maybe, Jeff Huber at Night Force they were sourcing some target scopes in there, and Jeff Huber got in there and he started holding them to account, and they started solving problems that were showing up and basically saying, here's this pinnacle of what a rifle scope should do, and what are the things that are not allowing us to get this type of performance, and then essentially created that capability inside of that factory. I mean, before that, they were Bushnell 3200s, and after that, they're Night Force ATACers.
Yeah.
Right. And so that created this change, and I think we've seen the same thing happen with like companies like a Vortex or a et cetera, that are doing a heavy business at some price points in Chinese product, and they're basically saying, hey, look, we're not just going to repackage this. We actually have to, have a good product here.
Yeah.
And then that's starting to drive this change. And I think that's where this is coming from. It's these big volumes of Chinese product through American brands, where the American brands aren't satisfied to just repackage anymore. They are actually saying, here's what we need to have for performance.
Yes, because the customer requires it. And I think it's awesome because the customer is the guy that wins. I think it was probably 2017, we as a rifle shooting community hit critical mass, where like the light came on of, hey, I understand the value of ballistic coefficients. I understand ballistic calculators. You could track it with 6.5 Creedmoor, right? The cartridge everybody loves to hate. Comes out in 2007. I fell in love with it about 2010, 2011. I was like, man, this thing's awesome. 2017, boom, it's everywhere. And
you're tracking it to the Creedmoor. I'm going to tell you, we shipped our first shooting system in 2007.
Yes.
I'm going to say, what?
But you were on the bleeding edge. Yeah, but you've always been on the bleeding edge of like that's your jam, and that's the DNA that you built your company around.
The education piece, I think, is one of the things we've been able to contribute to the industry is free information, professionally and consistently shared over time of how to do this. So that's one. And the second one is showing content that breaks those paradigms of understanding and those limitations and barriers. I mean, just the whole concept of the heavier high BC bullet, like that was a big part of our story for such a long time. And I really think it only takes a handful of great media producers to show people like how their misconceptions are right or wrong to either reinforce or to change those ideas. So that the slower high BC, here's another one. We started doing long range guns with 18, 20, 22 inch barrels. And we started pushing this really heavy about 5 or 6 years ago. And at the time, everybody's concept of a long range barrel is 26, 28 inches. Everybody's chasing extremely, high velocity rounds. And so we've been fighting this fight since we started. We went 7 rem mag instead of 300 rum. But you look now out there, you go look everywhere, and everybody's offering shorter barreled options.
Yes.
Right. And now that's set us up wonderfully for kind of this new suppressor revolution. Now that things are happening faster, like people are interested, they're becoming more prevalent. And now all of a sudden you don't feel less than by having a 20-inch barrel with a 6-inch can that is really nice to handle.
Right.
And you're giving up 150, 200 feet per second, and you don't have this machismo that says, oh man, I'm not performing. I mean, there's still the guys out there that like to run 95,000 PSI hand loads, but for the normal people, we're able to accept that because we realize the value of that ballistic calculator and how it can get us on target without having to chase those velocities.
Yeah. Well, and the rifle that you put together and you take out to the field, I mean, you got to live with that thing. And so, make it to where it's got good table manners, and a 20-inch barrel with a 6-inch can is a really great combination. And once you understand BC and basic, bullet construction, I mean, you got a great hunting companion that's not going to beat you up. What kills me is everybody's stepping on their hand loads and they're making them so hot that it's like, if you get a foggy morning and you get a little moisture on that cartridge, when you fire it, there's no shear transfer in the chamber. So that cartridge is slippery. So it tries to squish out the back. And now you're dropping primers or, there's all these problems.
Yeah, all that loads on your lugs. And as an engineer and a designer, it's like we design a lot of safety factor.
Right.
And the reason why we do that is because you can't account for all your variables. So fine, push a little bit, but I think some of that stuff we see is ridiculous. I think, kind of tying that back to gun writing, I mean, that was a big, long circle, but I feel like the two roles that I'm looking for today are what's new and exciting, which I think is awesome, and what is notable.
Right.
And just giving everybody that heads up that when it's notable, like the guys that have a reputation and that are real journalists, they'll let you know.
Yeah. Well, and to me, that's how you take care of the reader, right? Like if you write an article and you haven't answered the question, so what, then shame on you. And that's one of the benefits of growing up with editors in chief is if something sucks, they'll throw it back at you and be like, this is garbage, fix it. And they'll point out a few things like there's been no research. But let's use an example, your Nexus, right? When that thing came out, I mean, how much time did we spend on the phone talking about that? A couple hours, 3 hours, and more than one phone call. And then I remember, spreadsheets of data collected and testing. And that was a hard article to write for Guns and Ammo because that's a general interest magazine. And I've only got so many words to use. So you have to condense it down. But the whole theme of that thing was So what? Like, here you've come out with, it's an aluminum receiver. It's got a double stack mag. There's just so many unique characteristics about that thing that obviously there were a lot of labor pains associated with giving birth to that action.
Dude, I can't even. We don't have enough time to tell you all the ways we screwed that thing up.
But my job is to say, okay, ta-da, here it is. Here's why it matters to you. And one of the biggies is if you shoot a Magnum, that's the only double stack Magnum with a flush fit mag. So it's got good table manners, and you can live with it and still kill things far away.
There's little bits of elegance, I think, that are escaping a lot of the people that are designing, ideating, and producing products today. I mean, there are a few, and you can see those. They pop out, and you're like, "Ooh, wow, that's
different."
Yeah, there's somebody that's working really hard on that. They're not willing to take that first or second or third idea. You get way down in the weeds. My guys get so sick of me working with me.
Oh,
sometimes.
I bet. Yeah. But it's why you've got the product lineup that you've got. Is because this is something like, my big thing is, if you just treat it like, hey, I clock in at 8 and I go home at 5, like, you're never going to do anything great. The guy that does something that's amazing is the guy, like, when he's laying in bed at night before he falls asleep, this is what he's thinking about. When he's got a long road trip and staring out the windshield, that's what he's thinking about.
I wonder where this industry goes, because our product is very, very heavily influenced by the romanticism of weapons and weapon artistry and the history of our firearms business in our country and overseas as well. And I really absorbed a lot of that early, and it informs a lot of what we produce. Even though we're high tech and we're modern and we do this and that, like, you can find little bits of, iconic effort that you can trace back into our weapons that carry on the tradition. And I'm not going to bag on, like, chassis guns and where that part of our industry is going. But if we have some young guys that have been inspired to the industry by those products and get into engineering and design and marketing, etc., my gut tells me that at some point we're going to have the bulk of our industry that is grown up around and been informed by a completely different side of our firearms business. And I'm kind of curious where that's going to leave, some of the artistry and the elegance that firearms can represent.
Yeah. Well, and I think you see kind of like the telltales of where we're going right now, right? You look at the explosion in rifle shooting over the last 10 years and the interest, and then look at how much manufacturing has changed. A lot of times people don't realize that manufacturing changes so quickly that's why you can go buy a $500 Ruger American and it'll shoot sub-MOA.
Yeah.
10 years ago, if you had a sub-MOA rifle that was legit sub-MOA, man, that thing slept on its own pillow at night. Like, that was a big deal. And now you get one, you're like, it's just MOA.
There are some companies that are absolutely magnificent in their ability to produce a good product for a really, really great price.
Yes. And where you see the artistry is where, I can spend a lot of time talking about this, your stock design, not only the features built into it, but how it's put together. Because people look at carbon fiber and they'll be like, oh, it's a carbon fiber stock. Man, that is a world unto itself. And then,
we scrap at least one Nexus stock for every one we produce. At least.
Yeah.
And those
you guys are dummies on how to make stocks. Like, you've been doing it for a minute.
Just to do the layup on that stock and get a shell before we machine it or anything, we're close to $250 into it.
Right.
And the reason why we scrap them is because I can't compromise and do a product that sacrifices its aesthetic or functional form for a manufacturing limitation. And you go look at it, and this is how you tell this. Like, this is super easy for people that aren't discriminating consumers or designers. If you look at a stock and it is all round curves, that stock has been designed to pop out of a mold easily. If you look at a stock and you look and see a lot of hard edges, a lot of corners and transitions, that stock is immensely more difficult to manufacture.
Right. And there's a reason for those edges.
Yeah, you like thumb shelf, flats for bag writing, transitions. You like the leather inserts on that Nexus are an absolute headache for us. The thin. I'll tell you what. The worst thing on the Nexus is if you go to that bridge in the grip area, and this is why that grip has so much thumb shelf and it performs the way it does. You go to that little bridge in between, and you measure it on ours. We're less than 3/8 of an inch wide, and you go to another stock manufacturer, and that might be as much as an inch wide. And trying to sneak tubes and apparatus for manufacturing through that area and try to get pressure in corners, it's very difficult. And that, looking back, it's like, well, that was kind of a bad choice, but just strictly following function, that's where we ended up.
Yeah, but you took your beating and you got the education, and now the community benefits from a stock that's really unlike any other. And where else are we going to see, in the 5 to 10 years of the future, like, where are we moving? Where, can we please step away from the Remington 700 footprint? Like, it was great. It's still great, but there's a lot of imitations that come with that.
I don't know how. I really wonder if the industry matures beyond it. I don't think so, Tom. Like,
man, please.
I don't think
there's
so.
So many reasons.
No.
I mean, you and the Nexus have got it, have done a really good job, because it is a Remington 700 footprint, but you've made it capable of taking. You can fit a wide enough double stack Magnum magazine in it. Like, you suffered for that. And I guess
it's hard. It's hard to create something new. It's hard to create something new.
It is hard to create something new, but you have to have consumers that'll support you. And the one thing that I always come back to with a 700 is, thread engagement. You got 2 action screws, limited thread engagement to the receiver. And so, like, you have a really great solution to deal with that. But anyway, so there's that. And then we'll see it in electro-optics. I think that is probably a hot field right now as we're integrating, computers and displays into traditional optics. Like, that's the next 5 to 10 years.
I don't know about that. I lose my ass on every one of those stupid things. I have put so much money to develop the capability of creating those products. And
yeah, but your track record is you're always early. You're first. I think, man, here's why I say that. The Africa hunt, right? Like, we're actually going to talk about hunting in Africa.
Okay.
I mean, I'm familiar with your products. I've been using them for a long time. If I got questions, I call you up and pester you until I get answers. But sitting down with that Radical and hunting with it, I was like, this is, we've got different ways of how we handle wind and everything else. And, I've got the way that I've learned, and I've done it forever. I'm looking at how you do it because I think there's some things that I could improve. But the one thing that I keep coming back to is how quickly it was to input wind, dial a distance, and shoot.
But Tom, even if you really adopt our base wind vector wind methodology, you don't even have to input a wind, right?
Yeah.
For 80% of your work.
Yeah.
Like, you don't even need to input a wind. It's just right there for you.
Yes. And I'm open to that. But again, we've all got the way that we've been doing it. But what clicked for me was just how intuitive and easy it was to get a really accurate solution. Is that scope expensive? Yes, because there is a ton of capability that comes with it. But
it's not expensive we're basically doing all of the electronics for free because that scope punches right alongside of a Collis K-Series in terms of optical performance. I mean, the light transmission on that 4-25 is like it's over 97%. Like the
resolution is great.
It's a great scope in that term. Good features, good turrets, good adjustments, etc. And then all of the electronic stuff, because it's priced the same as those other products, all the electronic stuff is essentially free. And I like, if I was going to try to make the margin that some of these other companies that, that source product and put it through, if I was going to try to hit their margin numbers, I'd have to sell that scope for $5,000.
Right.
So
now my hope is similar to 6.5 Creedmoor, right? Comes out in 2007, gets embraced and becomes huge in 2017. My hope is that people will get on board with the advantages of scopes like yours, and that through economies of scale, they become,
Well, there already is. Like, you go look, the Burris Veracity PH.
Correct.
They've basically,
not as sophisticated, but yes.
I know this company that produces this for Burris, and they're a smart, good group of people. We've worked with them. Right. And they had one of our PMRs, and they basically did what I should have done in our first generation, which was just a data table, right? Basically, you've got 120 clicks or however many clicks you have in a turn. You've got X number of clicks, and they basically said for every one of those turret positions or clicks, here's a shoot to range.
Right.
And so it's just a data table you load up. It's the same exact sophistication as a laser mark turret with the ability to change the data by just pumping it in with Bluetooth. But I love elegant product solutions, and that one's so simple.
Yes.
And that's
the gateway drug.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's that?
So, and that's only $1,200, I think. So
bingo. Right. So might even be a little bit less. I don't know for sure.
Yeah. I think that there is an automatic pushback to technology in ballistics and scope products. Just like you are doing it the old school way.
Right. Yeah. There's always pushback.
So you have a lot of sophistication mixed in with what you're doing, but your work stream is not efficient.
Correct.
It's a sophisticated work stream. It's just not efficient. And it works for a lot of cases, but sometimes it doesn't work.
Right. And there are hangups, right? Like mine is not going to be as fast or as, and it's a classic sniper. That's where it all goes back to, right? Like that's how I grew up. And that's what I do. Like I like to have control, and I'm like, hey, I'm going to change environmentals when I want to change them.
I'm not going to try to trash talk here, but I got to tell you, when our guys go get trained by our military, they get trained. They are fucking trained.
Yes.
And they do not retrain very easily because I had a great podcast with one of my favorite employees. His name's Ian Miner. He's one of our shooting instructors. I've got 3 guys there that work full time. And we had he's been working for me for 3 years. And we had this great podcast. And I was trying to convince him about why dope cards are a waste of time, right? What you need is a BC and a muzzle velocity that is true for your system.
Right.
You don't need a dope card, right? And then you calculate forward what your conditions are instead of looking backward at what you've done in the past.
Yes.
And I feel like that dope card concept is it's the thing that everybody needs to just let go of. And then and be able to build the experience and the faith and confidence that those input values combined with a good ballistic solver will create a solution forward in any set of conditions.
Yes. However, I had a sniper class that I was teaching last week that I do from time to time for law enforcement, not because I've got, civilians should have all the same stuff, 100% on board with that. It's easier to talk to one department than it is to talk to 10 individuals. But I was preaching why you should have a dope card. So let's fight. And the reason why is I think if it's a rifle that you work with, you should have your dope memorized. And for an LE guy, I'm like, hey, every 50 yards out to 500 is not a big ask. Because what happens when you pile out of the car and it's time to start shooting? Like you can't be monkeying with stuff. And so I get what you're saying,
but here's
some baking in.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Here's a complete difference in our approach, though. That is life and death shit.
Yes.
And if you are military or you are police, I don't think many of the same rules apply, because guess what? They train, right?
Yes.
They train, and they have these situations where they need to do. As hunters, and we can kind of dip into some of the reasons why there's pushback on smart technology, but as hunters, we have this massive, ethical responsibility to make a good go, no-go decision, because we don't have to take that shot.
Yes.
Right? That is
big difference.
It's a huge difference. And even the scenarios that we're in and everything about it's different, and including the fact that most people that are hunters and shooters are not able to dedicate the time to developing those skill sets. And so that's where I step in and say,
big difference.
That type of training does not apply to civilian hunters.
Correct. Because, and I agree with you 100%. And people be like, well, why not do both? Well, okay, if you got the time, go for it. But here's the thing. If you subscribe to your system, which under the conditions that you just laid out, I totally do, here's why it matters. Because your job is to make an ethical shot, and you're going to get on a plane, you spend a lot of money, you're going to go on this hunt. What if the only shot you're going to get is going to be at a longer distance? You have to do the prep in advance. And so get to know your gear, get to know all the cutting edge stuff out there, learn how to use it, create some internal redundancies, and go have a great time. And it is a big difference, because, when we do it your way, you can get the latest and greatest out there. A lot of times when you talk snipers, either military or law enforcement, they're like, hey, here are the things that you're going to use. And we might have had them for 20 years, but this is your stuff now, so use it. So you got to work within those constraints too.
I think when we started, there was a lot of pushback to the concept of the turnkey system. There was a lot of pushback to this ballistic turret concept, and I knew it was ridiculous, because I predicted, after we launched that first product, the optics line, the custom ballistic turret, the shooting system, I knew, and I predicted this verbally, that within 3 years, every major optics company would offer a custom ballistic turret program.
Yep.
And they did, like within 3 years.
Yes.
Because that work stream is so good. Now, here's the pushback that we got on the ballistic turret was, hey, it's just set for one set of conditions, so it's a waste of time. And then, then obviously we introduced the rest of our system, which is the smart optic that does the corrections for you in real time for air density and incline. But I would argue that our system of the ballistic turret is exactly what you're talking about with a dope card. It's just generated based on a ballistic program, right? Using your shooting experience and efforts and data to create this drop chart. Because that's all that ballistic turret is. It's just a drop chart for one set of conditions, the way your gun performs.
Yeah.
And I actually think that tool in the hands of LE and military, in a lot of the engagements, would have a lot of value.
Yes. The only place where it starts to get tricky is because this is a drill that I'll have guys do, because like specifically law enforcement sniper, you got to be a master of the close fight. A lot of times, like law enforcement snipers be like, yeah, we're out at the 1,000-yard range. Did we spend a little time shooting long? Yes, because it's fun. But their primary obligation is close. And so the drill is, okay, there's you can see 1 inch of your target at 42 yards. Hit it. And so you got to have your ballistic calculator because you're going to dial up for that. That blows a lot of minds. They're like, wait. You know, like I'm dialing up on my elevation I'm dialing up from 100 yard zero.
Yeah.
Yes, you are. So now we get into sight height and how to correct for that.
Yeah.
But
I like it.
But that's the one sticky thing for LE guys. That now, is that like super niche and probably never be used? Of course. But if you can do that, you don't worry so much about the much easier shots that you'll face when it's time to do it for real.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of potential with technology going forward in the hunting space. I mean, we've invested pretty heavily there. Like, I live in a very modest house because I spend all my money making some cool
at work. Yeah. Thank you.
But I believe that there's a path there, but there's this unfortunate reaction to technology where
we hate it.
Yeah, and even
what if the battery dies?
Well, but even at the legislative level of hey, this is an unfair advantage, let's take it away. And a lot of our industry participates in those kind of feelings. Like there's an anti-long range sentiment. There's a sentiment about, you know, taking away, you know, advantages and opportunities. And I think everybody's looking at it the wrong way, because guess what? Everybody's going to shoot. You see a big old honking buck on the ridge. If you don't have a laser rangefinder and you don't have a smart scope, doesn't matter. Like
you're going to work your tail off because you guys are still you want it.
You go look back at that Chadwick ram, that stone sheep that was killed, and read the story about it. This is an engineer that was set up to shoot, and like he just was dropping long bombs at 800 yards until he hit it. Like, and this was 100 years ago. Like there is nothing that is going to prevent us from putting that hope in the air.
Yeah. I mean, it happens a lot, you know. My hope is that a guy that's, you know, the whole reason you're hunting is because you want the animal. And when the distance is further than you should be shooting, you know, I really hope someone says, okay, I need to not take that shot. But here's, you know, but like, you know, I'll get to hunt camp. They'll be like, okay, what range are you comfortable shooting at? And in my mind, I'm running through like, okay, how much time have I actually spent with this rifle? Because that's the predicament that I face is it's always a different rifle, a different scope, different. So in my mind, I'm like, how much time have I spent with it? Have I trued it out? Like, and I'll say, okay, most of the time, if I'm comfortable and I'm familiar and I got all my widgets, I'm like, hey, 600 is as far as I'm going. But I want to get as close as possible. And there's pressure, right, for what I do, because it's hard to write a story if you don't have an animal. And so I'm familiar with hey, I've got to be successful here. But I've also said, you know, it was a grizzly bear up in Alaska, and, you know, we're standing on the bank of the river and the grizzly bear's on the other side. And I remember I looked at the outfitter and I was like, hey, is there any way we can get closer? And he looked me right in the eye and he goes, are you comfortable shooting? I was like, give me a minute. And I built a position, and it wasn't until I was looking through the scope with the reticle on the animal and assessing, you know, my wobble zone and everything else before I said, I'm good. So you can't go in with, you know, a predetermined, like, I don't care what happens, I'm shooting. Like, that's where bad things happen. But there is huge pressure. And so my big plea is, pay attention to all the tools that you have available and learn how to use them. Spend some time, because a lot of stuff you can learn at the house sitting around in your underwear. And then you do have to go out to the range and figure it out, because that's where you get comfortable with it. But yeah, there's all these powerful tools that make us so much more effective. And it sucks when we're arbitrarily like, can't use that. Why? It's not fair.
Just take the reticle. And I haven't built this in yet, but it's super easy to do. But just take the reticle. So you're a wealthy construction business owner. You subscribe to the Gunwerks idea. You buy a system from us, and you're really into this. You're into hunting. You come out and you do a training course with us. You get familiar with your gun. You're learning how to, you know, adjust for wind, etc. So you're way up that learning curve. You've got a great piece of equipment. You've got the ability to manage it, get a shot off, read some wind. But you haven't you haven't done a lot of long range shooting in the field yet, right?
Yeah.
And you haven't built that experience level of, hey, this is where my comfort zone is. You're working on it, but you're not there yet.
Right.
I did this, going through the private pilot path. You kind of get towards the end and they're like, okay, you're going to have a license. We're not going to be able to watch over you. Let's talk a little bit about personal minimums before you leave, right? And so
Right.
they want you to write down on a piece of paper, here's where I feel comfortable,
Right.
in these kind of conditions shooting. And you can develop that pretty quickly in a 2-day course. You're like, oh man,
Yeah. Don't do that. Yeah.
yeah. And I think you go to our class, a guy that's never even shot long range before, like he's going to leave pretty confident at 700,
Yes.
750 yards. And
Yes.
I think most of them are going to leave with, hey, I actually probably won't take 1,000-yard shot unless everything
Conditions are perfect.
which never happens.
Shooting
So
conditions perfect. Everything's perfect.
I think we're able to expose at least that level of resolution for most of the beginners. And if you think, okay, well, so write down your personal minimums, and you could make that part of your, say, your ballistic profile or whatever. So when it goes into the radical and you've got the radical there and you are like in a condition and you dial up, it could flash at you and said, hey, you've just exceeded your personal minimum for, wind estimation, or you've just exceeded the threshold velocity for bullet expansion at this distance, or et cetera, et cetera. You can think of all these ways where you could incorporate some tools and guidance that can help you in the heat of the moment when, when you're really, really tempted.
Make good decisions.
Yeah, to just help you make that go, no go decision. I think technology will pave the way for those kind of things in the future, but we have a lot of reactionary it's almost that liberal, the state has to control you and tell you what to do type of attitude. Like, in other words, we can't let people make those decisions. We have to make them for them.
We have to make it for you, which really
dangerous. Like, dangerous.
It's dangerous. Yeah, I don't like the precedent. I don't like the mentality. Like, hey, I'm going to make my own decisions. Thank you very much. But I'll also tell you that, one of the most impressive things I've seen was when we were hunting, and that monster kudu you shot, 757, one shot, and the animal's down. And I remember thinking about that. That was, to me, that was it. That was enlightening, right? Because I'm always, I bring my own baggage to long range hunting, right? I'm really conservative. And so, we range that thing 757 and you start building a position quickly. And I was watching that come together, and, there's time constraints, and the position that you built was ideal for the conditions we had. But if you remember, you were on a slight downslope, which means your feet are above.
That wasn't slight. That was,
yeah. And so, like, the way you put the tripod in, I was like, okay, yep, he's been here before. But it's one thing, like, people will always, when you watch videos, you're like, well, they can edit this, they can edit that. Like, I was watching that thing come together in real time, and that was impressive. That was what happens when someone who's familiar with the equipment and knows how to use it can make a very difficult shot under less than ideal conditions and do so cleanly. 757, 180 grain burger, boom. And that was it.
You know what my favorite part of that story was?
What?
Carl and Ed.
Yeah.
like you could, like, Africa, in my opinion, it's something that everybody that's interested in hunting, or interested in precision shooting, it's something that everybody should experience.
Yes.
And I say Africa, I mean South Africa. And when I say South Africa, I mean East Cape, not frickin' North Africa, which is cool. It's got its own thing. But I'm talking big, wide open country.
And do yourself a big favor and go with John X Safaris. Go with Carl and Ed. I know, I'm telling you, I've been with a lot of outfitters and a lot of hunters, and those guys, are
It's
awesome.
unbelievable, isn't it?
They're priced mid-tier. That is absolutely John X Safaris, man. I will sing praise.
It would be a good value. It'd be a good value at 2 times the price.
Yes, it would. But anyway, what was their reaction?
Okay, so 2 scenarios. I shot that Gems buck earlier in the hunt, a few days earlier. It was 710, wasn't it? It was that far.
Yeah,
it was over 700.
I wasn't with you when you shot that one. I was off doing my own thing.
No, you were. You were there. Yeah, Gems buck out at the new place, and we were out on the plains. We were sitting up on the hillside. You were there.
Okay. There was a lot of animals.
Yeah, there was a lot of animals. But in that scenario, it was like, okay, well, let's just make sure it's mature and let's do that. And we shot it and loaded it up. And you contrast that versus in that scenario when that kudu came back and popped out, and it was go time.
Yeah, it's like not a lot of talking, man.
Nope. And remember, Ed wanted to bail off the hill and go do this, and Carl snapped at him and like, we're staying here and we're doing that. Like when those guys, when it gets serious, it's so real for them and so important for them to win, and big animals get them so excited.
Oh, that was a big one.
That's my favorite part is when you come across something big, like how everybody they get into that real go mode, and that's the piece I remember the most.
And the teamwork kicks in.
Yeah,
everybody's like, I was looking for a job. I was watching you build your position. I was like, I think I threw you my rear bag because I like my rear bag better than yours, and I think under that specific condition, my bag was the right answer. You wound up shooting with my rear bag, didn't you?
I actually think I did.
Yeah,
I would just be in
but to your point, everybody gets real serious really quickly because that's a huge animal, but it's far away, and we all understand. Yeah. In order for this to be successful, there can be no mistakes. Yeah. So, like, instead of me sitting over there with my thumb up my body, just be like, ooh, what's going on? Like, I got to try to contribute. And Carl and Ed were doing the same thing.
I will tell you, those guys are they're very careful about long range. We've been there. We've been going there for almost 15 years.
Yeah.
And when we went there first, like, they didn't believe any of the long range stuff.
Nobody does.
And it just grew from there. I mean, I think we just delivered 10 guns down there. Like, you don't even have to take a gun down there anymore. You just fly down and you shoot.
And you do a ton of hunting in a week. Holy cow.
At the experience level. And I'm telling you, I have probably pulled the trigger. I have probably pulled the trigger on over 350 animals down there.
Yeah.
So long range setups, sometimes it's culling and it's fast. It's get on this, it's execute, it's work stream. Yeah. And so when I talk about an efficient work stream that promotes successful engagement, like, I'm not talking from I'm sitting at my desk, doing, daydreaming. Like, I'm talking,
right.
Here is hundreds of successes and failures that inform every decision about every piece on every product that we make. Bipods, rifles, ammunition,
which is why you make every stuff. And I tell people this. I said, the reason Gunwerks has such an incredible product line is because there's you making the decision, and what are you doing? You're living the life. When you get committees and accountants and the dreaded lawyers involved, the products always pay, which means the consumer pays. Like, you get handicapped stuff. Like, it's not as good as it could be. It's made cheaper. Or
I think the key difference is somebody building the product the way that they believe it should be built, or are they building the product the way they believe the customer wants it built? That is the difference. And you can see it all over our industry. There's a lot of great people that are saying, this is what I want, this is how I'm going to build it. And
Bill Wilson, Bill Wilson's building stuff that he wants to, and he's just selling it to the rest of us.
Yeah.
And you. Yeah. Those are the two that lead.
No, there's tons. No, there's tons of guys, man.
There's tons. But yeah.
Well, what else about Africa was striking to you? What were those? I mean, we're 7 months away, 6 months away. What are the things that are like your big residuals, that your big takeaways?
Big takeaways for me, because I haven't hunted Africa a ton. I've hunted plains game, a handful of times. And the one thing that I'd like to make sure everybody knows is that for a price of a trophy elk hunt in the U.S., you can do a plains game hunt in South Africa and do a lot more hunting. Like it's, I was really, tame and I had 5 animals. And,
Did you feel it was a give me?
No. If you just want to just shoot something, anything, depending on the species and where you're at, because that's the thing about Africa is like there's no fences anywhere. But when you step out of the truck, and we were up at that new place, I remember looking around and I was like, I think I counted 6 or 7 species. I got out of the truck and just started looking, not animals, species, and they're running everywhere. But if you were looking for something specific, you're gonna have to work for it. So it's lady's choice, right? If you want an easy hunt, you can have an easy hunt. If you want something special, you can find it, but you're gonna work for it.
I want to tell you that I think you had a great representative experience, except for the one day. I think you had a great representative experience of what you can expect when you go to Africa, which is, a lot of opportunity. There's some animals that are collecting and shooting, and collecting.
Yeah.
There's some animals that are hunting. But I'm telling you, that day that we shared together on Spirals I think it ranks as the most special day that I've had there in probably 100 days of hunting.
Yeah.
Like it was
wild. Yeah. Even I recognized, I was like, this is probably never going to happen again in my lifetime.
Yeah. And I've been there enough times that there's a few things, there's this weird hunting karma that exists. And we go down there with our customers. We take 10 to 20 customers every year on a trip.
Yeah.
It's a hosted hunt, and some guys just go on their own. But we go down there, and I always tell guys, don't have an agenda. Have a budget, but don't take an agenda. Because what you want to do is you want to tell your PH, hey, look, let's go have a good time. Yeah. If we see something big, let's smoke it. Because what that does is it takes all this pressure to perform off. I've seen the guys that go down there and like, man, I got to have a 52-inch kudu. Yeah. And then all of a sudden this pressure's on and they won't shoot anything else until that kudu's killed, and they don't have the great experience. The other guy that's like, hey, I have no agenda. Here's my budget. If we see something big, let's chase it. He puts together this awesome selection of trophies over a week, and you run into these things that are not there. Like, you saw that, I'm sure.
Dude, there was 2 animals that I was like, one of them was that sable, man. Like, there was a couple beautiful, and I was like, but I'm hunting this other thing right now. And then, that happened. That does happen a couple of times. But one is, for not a ton of money, you can hunt really great animals. And then the other thing is, and this is specific to John X, and I call this out, they are priced mid-pack, but I have never had such a posh hunting experience. The food, like,
nowhere in the world that even has come close to that.
No. There's some things I don't get excited about eating, right? Like normally you say, hey, Tom, we're eating oxtail. I'll be like, all right, I'm going to dig deep and get it done because that's the kind of guy I am. Man, come day 2, I don't care what they were putting on the table. I was eating until I was full. And I'd ask what it was later. Like everything was delicious. And then, my wife, she was like, you were hunting, the little basket under your sink. At first, it's like you're staying in a 5-star hotel, but there's a basket under the sink. When you get back hunting, put your clothes in the basket, and lunchtime the next day, they're clean, folded, and sitting on your bed.
Those kinds of things are common there. I mean, South Africa is great for that. I'll tell you the thing that Carl's been able to capture is that vibe. Like you picked up on this. All the PHs, everybody was like good family. They're just like cool, good dudes, and they're all unique.
Talk about anything,
and they compete hard. And
what's that?
Like there's this rivalry and competition that exists. There's this brotherhood that exists. And when you're there for a week,
all of it healthy.
When you're there for this week, you're getting to experience a little bit of this lifestyle and this thing that they have going. And I go back almost every year just to partake of that. not necessarily to hunt the next thing or whatever, but
Right.
take of that.
It's the dudes. It's the guy. It's Carl, Ed, the whole crew.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I was hunting with Ed, man, and like we would talk, history of South Africa, the Boer War. I mean, like double guns. I mean, all of it.
All those guys have
And,
a great education. They're educated. They're smart. They're hardworking. They're fun. Like,
Yeah.
you never. I don't.
Because all it takes is one salty dude in camp, and it kind of tarnishes it for everybody. And there wasn't even a whiff of that.
No. When we take crews down there, they're all awesome dudes. So I was talking about this vibe.
Yeah.
And this laissez-faire, like, let's take what comes attitude. I think one of the coolest things I've experienced there is momentum. And because you're not just hunting one animal, maybe you see it sometimes, but every few years, like, something good starts this cascade of events that just creates this momentum of success. And I've seen it before where, like, we'll be getting our butts kicked. We'll go 2 or 3 days. We'll fail. And then Carl, because I've always hunted with Carl generally. And so he'll be like, he won't say this, but I see what happens is we need to break this, this vibe. We need to break this. And so he'll divert, we'll go do something else. We'll hit success. And then all of a sudden that rolls into this next thing and success, and it rolls again and again, again. And that day that we had, like, we got our butts kicked. We were hunting for kudu. We went
Last 2 days.
We went to a place where we knew there was big bulls because our team had hunted there just a few weeks prior and had left 5 or 6 big bulls that they'd seen in the area. And they left them there. They killed a big bull and left. And we go back and it's rut time. I mean, we should be seeing stuff, and we got nothing.
Yeah.
And we were getting our butts kicked, and you could see the pressure starting to build with Carl, right? And that pressure,
eyes on glass.
Yep. And that pressure is always a bad thing, but it was building and building and building, and finally he just like, we got to do something different. So we went north. We went and hunted this huge concession. It was, what did we have? 60,000 acres.
Yeah. Crazy.
Plus, some low fence, some high fence, and we roll up, and we kind of do the, we meet the owner, we get sorted out, and literally 5 seconds later they see a bull over across this valley, and it's on. And it was so funny because they do the classical mistake, like when you get excited before you put a good plan together and you just go, hike just all the way down. Go. I'm programming your ballistics into my stuff, and you're going down the hill, and everybody's there, and we set up, and it's like it wasn't quite the right angle.
Yeah.
And we make a plan, we settle down, we hike all the way back up, we circle way around, miles around, and we put this big stock, and we move in. We were what?
300.
We were under 500 yards, which feels like a gimme shot, but we're in vegetation where it's prone. Sitting with a tripod, and in my opinion, 350, 400 or 500 yards from a sitting position is a long ways, especially when you throw a little added pressure. And I don't know if you felt the excitement of the size of the animal, but I mean, I'm pretty sensitive to those guys, but like it was big.
I could tell, like I could tell the pressure. I got seated, and that is a big kudu, and he was moving. And I think it was Ed, it might have been Carl, someone real casual was like, "Hey Tom, how do you feel?" I was like, "I feel great," because I, got in my position, checked through the scope, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, we're fine at this distance, like we're good." But again, Aaron, this is what happens when you have a supremely competent team, which John X does, and people show up and they're willing to work and they're willing to have a good attitude, and like you create your own luck.
Yep.
And so, it would be really easy when we were burning our eyes out to get miserable and sulk, and that has an impact on everybody. But to have, and sometimes it's hard to fight those, but I really credit Carl and Ed with taking those difficult situations and not letting it get them down.
Yeah.
And then, Carl having it was a good trick. He's like, all right, we're going to go do something completely different now, because we got to snap this.
But that, like, we had a once in a lifetime kudu trophy down by 9:00. And then that literally cascaded into
an amazing day,
one of the best days. And if you think about, okay, so we shot that awesome Nyala down in the river bottom. You shot that. It's just magnificent. And then we come across that kudu and we're able to take that, and it's end of day, and there's just this fraction of day left.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys would have just said, wow, we killed 3 world-class trophies, like
great animals today.
Like 3 trophies. We would have been, let's just cruise back. Let's take it easy. But I don't know if you picked up on this. Those guys are killers. And Carl knew we had this momentum. And it's almost like there's this, when this starts happening, there's almost this realization that you're going to win no matter what. And so there's this destiny, this manifest destiny of success that becomes. And so they basically said, let's go. They had left a couple skinners back there to take care of the few trophies that we had. They had instructed those guys to just sit out and watch for bushbuck.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and one of them kind of has a little thing, loves to kill big bushbuck. It's like his thing.
Right.
And so they're like, we're going back. They hadn't talked to him, hadn't heard from him, but there was almost this expectation that they would have found a big buck.
Right. They've been there they've had enough time. They found something.
And if you're those Land Cruisers, man, they're so squirrely. I mean, we're driving at the limit of power and handling for 20 or 30 minutes. We might have 10 minutes or less of shooting light left. And we roll into where our radios start working, and we're like, hey guys, have you seen anything? And they're like, I've got something that might be good now. And we didn't even go around to where those guys were looking. We were rolling in, we found the spot, we went right at it, we shot, we killed. And that is the biggest bushbuck I've ever killed. It's 15 inches. It was freaking
huge.
Amazing.
Yes. But I'll also tell you, we all had to be willing to work. That's what it comes down to. Like Carl, Ed, all the trackers, the skinners, everybody was working hard. But you know how it is. Like you get a big animal and then there's now I just want to chill. You have to stay in it. And we did. And that's one of the big reasons why I think you got that monster bushbuck, because you were willing. As soon as they said we got something, you're like, let's go right now.
Yeah. Well, I think that was one of my favorite days hunting. I'm so happy that I was able to share that with you.
Likewise, dude. That I had so much fun. I felt I was just like with one of my buddies that was really talented, and it was a phenomenal. Like I loved that hunt.
Like that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
If you like what you're hearing here, please take a second and give us a 5-star rating and a positive review on iTunes or on your favorite podcast app. We appreciate your feedback and suggestions for topics you'd like discussed or questions you want answered on the podcast. You can reach out on Facebook or Instagram or send us an email to podcast@gunwerks.com. Also, be sure and check out our full offering of long-range gear at gunwerks.com. Use promo code LRP for free shipping on any order.